You know, before I go on to the review, I just want to say a little something to the comic book community out there. We can't all read every single comic book and know every single thing about every single superhero prior to seeing a movie about them, and sometimes an audience wants to be surprised by the story twists when they're watching the actual movie. Just because you know the true identity of the Winter Soldier because you read the story from the comics before seeing the film, and have henceforth been outright casually spoiling it for everyone not already in the know, doesn't make you come off as intelligent, noteworthy, or cool. It makes you come across as an arrogant know-it-all prick trying to brag about how much of a loyal fan you are. Now that that's off my chest, onto the review. Captain America the Winter Soldier really could have gone in either direction based on Marvel's track record. The first movie really was a mixed bag. They nailed the character of Steve Rogers, and while the movie's unapologetic depiction of such a nice character made me appreciate the entire thing a whole lot more, unfortunately come its second act, it really sank beneath its own weight. It suffered from a mix of generic action schlock, too big a focus on setups for future movies, and good old originitis. Once Steve Rogers became Captain America, it all turned into a pretty generic action movie with a really rushed pace and a poor villain, all for the sake of setting things up for the future installments to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Things like just how Captain America received his rank and became an icon to the world was just kinda summed up through a montage, the love interest just kinda kissed him at the end, and even his big heroic self-sacrifice at the end was just contrived without making much sense so we could get him in the Avengers. So yeah, not that great. And then taking all of that into consideration, there's also the big glaring con to the entire concept of a shared universe. A huge chunk of the audience that saw the Avengers never bothered with the lead-ups to it, and they understood and loved the movie all the same, and this was kinda worrying. It's incredibly easy for these flicks to come across as take them or leave them additions to a franchise, as merely installments tying an audience down until it's time for another Avengers sequel, and if they're all going to be like that, is there any real point in watching them? Thor: The Dark World suffered from this issue a lot. While it had good dialogue, some witty humour, great performances from Hemsworth and Hiddleston, a truly amazing score, and some great fun action, it all came off as a pretty inconsequential by-the-numbers outing for Thor and the gang, lacking a lot of unexplored elements of Thor's universe that fans had hoped to see after getting a taste of them in the first film, and not really affecting the Marvel universe or the story or characters in any game-changing way. And I can't stress how bad it is for your sequel to feel inconsequential. We can all forgive an origin movie for the simple fact that it is an origin movie, but in a sequel, if there's no development, what was the point of sitting through all of it? So after all of that, it makes it all the more surprising that Captain America the Winter Soldier turns out to be the film we've all been waiting for. While I wouldn't go as far as to call it a perfect movie, I will go as far as to call it a pretty darn great one. A smart, soaring blockbuster which manages to outdo its predecessor in more ways than one, and is undoubtedly the most self-aware Marvel film since the Avengers, knowing exactly what kind of movie it's trying to be and executing it flawlessly. The studio's tactic of taking risks and mixing things up by giving each Avengers character a distinct tone and genre for their own movie pays off unimaginatively well here, putting Captain America in what very much harkens back to a classic 70s political espionage thriller. And having the man who is the very ideal of freedom, liberty and justice be our eyes and ears in a conspiracy plot where we don't know who we can trust makes him a perfect protagonist. Underneath its stellar action, which believe me we'll get to, is just a really tight screenplay. This is where I think the movie benefits from being directed by the Russo brothers who've come straight off of television. It's the first of the Phase 2 movies that, at long last, slows down. It's the first to not feel the need to rush from one set piece to the next without exploring anything interesting, and instead allows us to finally sink our teeth into the unexplored elements of Captain America as a character and an icon. Here we finally do get those scenes of him walking around, observing modern society and trying to adjust to a new life. Even a couple of scenes that were written for the Avengers have been reworked and placed in this film, one of which involves a very touching scene where he goes to visit a much older Peggy Carter. I gotta thank the movie gods for that one. Finally, we get a film that gives us time to ask questions we should be asking. It was a good call not calling this Captain America 2, as these movies are incredibly different from one another, but in a really great way. Where in the first movie the conflict is a very black and white good versus evil fight, this takes a superhero from that honest time and sticks him in a modern era where we now live in a much more morally mixed up world. How can we sleep easy when there's so much power in the hands of an increasingly militarized America spreading fear over freedom? These are socially relevant questions to ask in our modern age, which Captain America himself really struggles to deal with, and the film does not shy away from exploring them. As with the other Marvel movies, the dialogue and banter between the characters works so well, but thankfully the overdone comedy is nowhere to be seen. In comparison to Iron Man 3, it's not goofy. It doesn't take the opportunity to favour gags over intense moments, but overall is just really timely and well placed. Chris Evans has finally sold me on being the perfect actor to play Steve Rogers. Perhaps he had to get a little more comfortable in the role as time went on, but now for the first time he 100% becomes the character. He owns this flick with a commanding presence, and by the time he's making his big patriotic speech nearing the final climactic battle, I knew I was watching the character come to life. Finally we get the Captain America that takes charge and leads the good fight, letting us see once and for all what he's all about, which makes this the defining Captain America movie. And this whole thing isn't even simply a one-off adventure, things actually matter this time round. That's one of the key things that separates it from becoming another take-it-or-leave-it edition. The Winter Soldier is really a compelling self-contained story which will affect the future movies, and it even concludes thematic arcs that have been going on since the very first installment of the series. Not only do we finally stop to ask just how untrustworthy S.H.I.E.L.D. is, but it actually becomes a central plot point of the whole movie. The Winter Soldier manages to do what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has tried to do now for 16 episodes in just 2 hours and 15 minutes. Falcon is also a great addition to the roster, and his quick wit and light-hearted spirit is bound to make him a fan favourite. Robert Redford also does a great job as one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top men, who, if you have any kind of a brain, you'll figure out from his first scene, but that doesn't really matter. He still steals every moment he's in, and he actually brings a level of respectable gravitas to the entire picture. And while the script is really sharp and we get a lot of character development, it's all balanced with some amazing action which completely dominates this flick, making it the most entertaining superhero movie since the Avengers. I honestly had more fun with this than I did the Lego movie. Again, the specific genre assigned to each character pays off well here. It's refreshing to see real creative stunt work and choreography in a movie that takes place after ones with a prominent focus on CGI. As opposed to the big cosmic flying from Thor or the futuristic tech fights from Iron Man, the Winter Soldier has masterfully executed its intense grounded action with a mix of hand-to-hand combat, aerial dogfights, gun battles and car chases. And it's all real. Well, apart from Falcon and the shield when it gets thrown, but you get the idea. It also just gives the film liberty to mix things up a bit. 1 second Cap can be doing some awesome gymnastic flips avoiding gunfire to then throw his shield with his superhuman strength, and it works perfectly. It's very much a conspiracy thriller with superheroes, and this will undoubtedly be a redefining genre mashup for future flicks to think about. Even the costumes are ginormous improvements, for God's sakes. Seriously, Avengers, if your helmet was so dorky and awkward that you felt the need to rip it off halfway through the fight, perhaps a redesign may have been in order. Unfortunately, the Winter Soldier's main downfall is its title and handling of the actual Winter Soldier character. Most people will be surprised to find out that he isn't so much a main nemesis as he is a part of the overall puzzle to get us to the actual villain plot. In that regard, he's a bit more like Scarecrow from Batman Begins, and that would be fine because the film hints at him being a badass mysterious mercenary for the cinematic universe, i.e. Marvel's Boba Fett, who could have simply served for some awesome fight scenes and get fleshed out in a future installment, but annoyingly this is where the title hurts the film. Because the character is in the title, but the movie is not prominently about him, it feels the need to give us more Winter Soldier stuff, so it unfortunately shoehorns the reveal of his secret identity into the end of the second act. My problem with this is that they waited too long to do it, and it makes the entire personal conflict between him and Cap in the final showdown feel extremely tacked on. It didn't bother me too much considering the central conspiracy plot the movie chooses to focus on more was executed so well, and I also don't have a problem with setting up the character for further development in a future movie, but calling this the Winter Soldier when it's not primarily about the Winter Soldier suggests at an attempt to pull in a comic book crowd, which I fail to see the point in since you're already making a Captain America movie and people are going to see this no matter what. The movie also forgets to tell us why Agent 13 is important. I know she's meant to be, I just don't know why. And I usually don't have an issue with product placement, but I really could have done without the scene where they went into the Apple store because that completely took me out of the movie. But in wrapping up, Captain America the Winter Soldier is the definition of taking things in the right direction. It's smart, it's fun, it's action-packed, it's character-driven, and the film actually jumps at the opportunity to go down some unexplored territory. It's amazing how many types of films this works as. It works great as a spy film, it works great as a conspiracy thriller, it works great as a straight-up action movie, but more importantly, it works great as a superhero and a Captain America movie. Its unique tone, style, action, entertainment factor and script separates it from fading into obscurity as just another installment in a series, and instead makes it the best Marvel singular superhero movie since Iron Man. Cheers for watching guys, and as always if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel.